60 years ago, some of the men who worked in the Woolwich Arsenal would have left work on a Saturday afternoon to play for the Arsenal football team. Today, the men who play for the club know little and care even less about their origins. And this is perhaps a tragedy, for the dynamic history of Woolwich is rapidly becoming less and less important in the present day. For it is now quite possible that a national landmark, the Woolwich Arsenal, will soon close. Unless, that is, men like Frank Glasson have their way.
For 30 years I've worked in the Royal Arsenal Woolwich. And now, not for the first time, but possibly the last, there is the threatened closure as announced by the Minister of Defence Army Department, involving the lives of 3,800 people. Many of these live and work in Woolwich, and not only those but people all over the country have disagreed with this decision, and accordingly a petition was submitted to Parliament with over 27,000 signatures.
To the Honourable the Commons of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland in Parliament assembled, the humble petition of the employees of the Royal Ordnance Factory, Woolwich, residents of the surrounding boroughs and towns, and other British subjects, showeth that sufficient work is available on the production of... This is not the first time that Woolwich Arsenal has had to fight for its existence. In 1906, the Arsenal workers, led by Will Crooks, then Labour MP for Woolwich East, presented a petition to the Prime Minister after a rally in Trafalgar Square. In 1670, when Woolwich Arsenal, or an early form of it, was first established, it would have been difficult to foresee such a situation arising. Most of the work was done by convicts who spent their off-duty hours in rotting hulks moored on the Thames off Woolwich Warren. By the 1870s, with the growing military commitments of a powerful Britain, the Woolwich Arsenal was assuming a dominant role in the expansion of the country and in the economic growth of Woolwich. Armaments were getting bigger, so too the number of people employed in their production. People were coming to Woolwich for work. They had to be housed and entertained. Woolwich was growing fast. With the advent of the South African War, some 220,000 people were employed. 1914 saw a tremendous surge in output, needed to equip the front line for the war to end all wars. The Woolwich Arsenal had become a vast factory, a part of history, a local and national institution, the biggest working men's club in Woolwich. As Christopher Mayhew, Member of Parliament for Woolwich East, said in 1954,
Woolwich Arsenal is not just another Royal Ordnance Factory. Indeed, I feel that an Englishman's liberty owes far more to the broad acres of Woolwich Arsenal than to the playing fields of Eton.
The Arsenal, though associated with a great history over several hundred years, is not outdated, though people tend to think of it in terms of cannonball and brass cannon. We have here today a factory which has been modernised at a cost of £3 million of taxpayers' money. But over the last 10 or 12 years, the government has put out work on conventional as well as unconventional weapons to private firms. Winston Churchill said to America before she entered the war, "Give us the tools and we'll finish the job." The men in the Royal Arsenal say, "Give us the job, we've got the tools."
Woolwich lies in the southeast corner of the County of London. It is split north and south by the River Thames, and its two distinctly different halves are connected only by the free ferry.
I sometimes think that people coming over to North Woolwich is something out of this world. They don't even know North Woolwich, some of them. The old boats, the paddlers, used to be nice open deck fore and aft, and men used to come out just for the pleasure of the trip to and fro, perhaps stop aboard quite a while. But these, they don't seem to want to know so much. After all, you get aboard these, there isn't much to see really now. Everybody says, don't you find it monotonous? Here you've got every variety of craft, ship, winds, tides, darkness, daylight, everything. There's something different, there's something moving. Ships from all over the world going in, going out. They haven't got time to be monotonous. When you're indoors, you listen to conversation, all your brothers, well, all they can talk about is water, 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 where they've been, what they've done, different tides, winds, gales, God knows what, you know. It was just instilled into you, isn't it? So naturally I took it up, against his advice. After all, he was battered about and knocked around sailing. It wasn't a good life in regards that way, but you liked it. There was something about it, you know. The old sailing ships in the square riggers and that sort of thing. Well, the same thing applied in a smaller way. I used to love it. I know everybody practically, and everybody knows me. More so working on a job like this. I mean, in fact, there's hundreds know me and I don't know them. They see you up here, but you can't see all them down there, see? Funny point about the ferry, no matter where you go, sure as how I come from Woolwich, the first thing out their mouth is, do I know the Woolwich ferry?
The ferry, the Arsenal and the Army have given Woolwich its foundations. But inevitably other influences are being felt. Today's generation, with its newfound affluence, is treated with caution, with enthusiasm, even bewilderment. It costs £25 for a course of this treatment. Cheap may be, but for others, memories of more stringent days are not hard to come by.
They've got more money, you see, and you can do a lot of things when you've got money. When we were children, we didn't only have a very small amount of money. We were lucky if we had a penny, because your father only earned small money in those days in the Arsenal.
All you need is money, and if you got no money, we trust you. Ernie will be about soon. And when Ernie turns up, you'll all have money. And you'll all have dresses to match.
Much of the day-to-day shopping is done here, and almost anything can be bought. The quality is not always perfect, the taste a matter for debate, but general presentation is slick and the price is right.
There you are. Holding it. Right. 3.5. Right, good.
Yeah, we got money.
And we've got tristle. We've got print. Look at that lovely print, eh? If you ain't got a husband, I'll show you how to get one quick. 3 yards, walk through the park. By the time you get out the other end, you'll be a married woman with 6 children. So
I'm
help
doing
me God.
absolute plain.
Yeah, are you getting married? Getting buried? We got something for everything. Oh, no, 3 and 3, we do it 3 bob.
Who says the pound for 1 and 9? It's all there. £1 11 pound or 1 and 9 a pound. It's all there.
There's nothing left.
Serve you well, serve you cheap.
Our target runs for 1 and 6. 1 and 6 and 8 paper. Nice bunch of carnations for 2 3 shillings.
£2 a shilling. Everybody want the other £2 apple bar? £2 a pair's a shilling. £2 a shilling pairs. £2 a bob. Who wants the other £2 a shilling? £2 a pair a shilling.
The market houses an assortment of business talents. Side by side, the quick snip, the honest bargain, the long-established family business, and the smart huckster.
It's never been known in Woolwich when a man goes mad in the market square to advertise an offer on behalf of the farm. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. Come here. First of all, I'm going to give you a jam roll we're calling lot number 1. It costs a shilling to buy. If I charge you a penny, it's not there. On the top, I'll give you a box of Bakewell. It costs £2. That's number 2. I'll give you a large box of almond slices. Costs 1 and 6pence. That's 3 of them. I'll give you a 2-bob gatto. That's number 4. Now, what, ladies and gentlemen, to buy? Fair enough, 10 bob. And on the top, I'll give you a continental slice. Cost 1 and 9pence.
Okay. The pegs on them you can bend in double and they'll undrape. Good peg. The normal retail price of those indoor dryers is £600.
Oh dear, there's hardly anybody about. And the streets were gay. There's nothing there now. It's dead. It is absolutely dead. They don't go out for their entertainment like they used to.
My father used to take my sister and I up to see full just church parades on Woolwich Common on Sunday morning.
It was a very pretty picture to see the old band marching down the parade to the church. It was quite an occasion.
The Sunday morning church parade is no more. The garrison church, once focal point of Sunday activity, is now a wartime ruin. But once a year, the pageantry of the artillery is reborn. Every year, on a summer Saturday, the rain comes down, and the Royal Artillery are at home. The growth of Woolwich Arsenal brought with it the establishment of a regular garrison of artillery, together with an officers' academy, which was rebuilt after the fire of 1873. Throughout the 19th century, the Royal Artillery was to see active service both overseas and at home. Whenever the British Army saw action, the artillery played a big part. Their tradition is a proud one, their history one of distinction and courage. Much remains unaltered, but much changes. This is Nick Stacey, rector of St. Mary's. He wears blue jeans under his cassock, and as someone once said, for a clergyman, he's the best public relations man I know.
It is well known that in these riverside areas, and this is true about Woolwich, Deptford, Bermondsey, Southwark, there are traditionally non-church-going areas. The average number of people who worship in England today is estimated at about 10%. In the sort of area that we're serving, the figure is 1%. We have 15,000 people living in this parish. They are not churchgoers. They have never been churchgoers, nor have their fathers or grandfathers before them. But they are enormously friendly towards the church. I have never had a door shut in my face. There are many times when I wonder what the role of the church is in our modern, secular, materialistic society. Very often it's difficult to see people having spiritual needs. And I think this is partly because for the people in this part of Woolwich, for the first time in the whole of the history of Woolwich, the vast majority have a material affluence, the like of which they have never known before. Now, I welcome this. I think this is marvelous. This has enriched their lives enormously. The labor-saving devices that people now have in their homes makes being a housewife less of a drudgery. But it has meant, and this is very understandable, people who have never had these things before have been swept off their feet by their enthusiasm for them. Now, I suspect that we are going through a difficult period in our society in which many people still believe that this affluence is going to meet their deepest needs, is going to give them happiness. But sadly and slowly and painfully, an increasing number of people are discovering that man cannot live by bread alone, that all the affluence in the world does not bring this inner happiness.
And they're coming up again, and they're off, and they're all coming over onto the stand side. One of those who were very quickly away was Sporterville, and towards the end of the first furlong, it is Sporterville who's showing just in front. And just behind the leaders, showing good speed, is Oak Beam. They've covered just over a furlong, and it's Sporterville, Punton, and Oak Beam who are the three leaders. Then just behind the leaders comes Champion. They are under 5 furlongs from home. And Oak Beam, right over on the stern rails, is showing up now just in front with Devon Scrapper and Rafter. But now they've got halfway, and it's Rafter who's just gone on with chuckling close up behind the leaders. They've got under 3 furlongs to race. Oak Beam showing just in front. And there are about 4 shots. Sportville on the outside, now being joined by Joe Simon. Champion and Oak Beam on the stand side, together with chuckling Rafter. It's going to be a tremendous race as they come down to the final furlong. And it looks as though it's going to be Rafter and Oak Beam on these two just in front of Sportville, and finishing fast is Athenia. They're racing for the final 150 yards, and it's Oak Beam who's now just gone on from Rafter. It's going to be a close thing, but in the last 50 yards, Oak Beam is the winner by about...
I suspect when the penny's dropped on this, slowly people will start reconsidering the roots of the basis of life. I mean, why are we here? What is the meaning of life? What is its purpose? I marry young couples who fly off to Jersey for their honeymoon, while a few decades ago, if they had one night away in a pub in Southend, they would have been lucky. All the modern affluence I welcome. I think it's marvellous.
Like most couples, one of their problems is finding a place to live. In East Woolwich, there is little to please the eye. The majority of houses were built at least 60 years ago, their only virtue being solid foundations, which even the wartime blitz could not disturb. In West Woolwich, at a place like Eltham, there's much to please the eye, but pleasure costs money.
The possibilities of vast development on the eastern side of this town have been discussed with various ministers in the past few months. With the closing, or the possible closing of the Arsenal site, we would release about 1,200 acres for redevelopment, which is roughly an eighth of the area of the whole borough of Woolwich as it now stands. There has been some talk for some 2 or 3 years past now of building a stilt town on the marshes to the east of this town, a town that could hold 25,000 people.
I've been in Woolwich about a year now studying architecture at the Poly, which, if you consider, it's really rather odd because it's not as if Woolwich is a place with great buildings that you can soak up the atmosphere from. Some of it's quite nice. There's some new flats up on one of the hills which I quite like. They're quite good in themselves, but they don't seem to be blended in very well to the rest of the town. Mind you, this is difficult because planning of this kind is always difficult, and it's one of the major problems, I think, of the towns of the country today. And there's great opportunity for this sort of planning in Woolwich. As far as I can see, the town hasn't changed much since the Arsenal was built. People still lead the same sort of lives.
And you know, Woolwich has got a character of its own. It doesn't quite feel that it's part of London. It feels it's a town, almost a provincial town. And when the people of Woolwich say they're going to town, they don't mean London. They're going to Beresford Square, which is another psychological significance about the state of mind of the people of Woolwich. And there's no harm in it. In fact, it's a very good thing for people to have a civic consciousness and to be proud of the borough in which they live. I was a member of the London County Council for East Woolwich first in 1922. Some years later I became an alderman, which was a pity because William Beresford told me that he had his eye on me to be a possible member of Parliament for East Woolwich, which would have been very acceptable. However, it was my fault. Naughtily, I didn't consult him. The first thing they did with me after I became LCC member was to arrange a tour of the borough. We went all round the borough where they showed me things that they wanted the London County Council to do for the borough or to help the borough in doing them. And it was very educational, and of course I did my best to get their ideas accepted by the council, and in a number of cases I was successful.
During my term of office last year as mayor, we met many of the youthful organisations of the boroughs. We met them at their dances, their swimming galas and their various social functions. One of the points they made repeatedly to us was the lack of facilities for the general youth of the borough in the town centre. This is a fact, that in the town centre of Woolwich, the town does die after 6 o'clock in the evening. Once the large shopping centre is closed down, the place is still lit up, but it remains quiet and dead until the early hours of the morning.
Life hasn't changed in Woolwich for the last 100 years. There's practically nothing to do in the evenings. Nothing's open except the usual round of bingo and cinemas and I suppose a few pubs, which I like. I like the pubs in Woolwich, but by and large there's very little. Not for young people like myself, anyway.
Once upon a time, there were 2 theatres in Woolwich. The first owed its inception to the officers of the Royal Artillery, who arranged a series of musical evenings and recitals. Soon, one-act plays were being produced, and eventually the theatre, as it had now become, was taken over as a commercial proposition by outside interests. Plays were produced with commendable regularity, but not much imagination. And although the theatre occasionally mustered a variety of talent, public apathy finally forced a closure after years of varying fortune. The other started in the fine traditions of music hall. Soon it had gone the way of all flesh, which delighted the majority of the garrison soldiers, annoyed the local clergy, boosted the box office takings, but did little to improve the cultural scene. On March the 29th, 1958, the Empire closed as well. And then there were none. Not one living theatre in East Woolwich. But no one seems to mind. The scene is hardly one to rouse the imagination. And as far as the Beat generation is concerned, their mid-mod fab gear world scarcely exists.
It's true there are plenty of cinemas and pubs, and maybe that's fine for older people. But I don't think that we would be very happy with our youngsters hanging around pubs.
I don't think they come up to the old dancing. The old dancing was more graceful. Their ideas have changed a bit about entertainment now, haven't they?
They're all right. They have to be looked after because they have more chances to have the fun.
Why shouldn't you enjoy yourself?
In general, I don't suppose they've changed all that much. They've just got a relaxed attitude.
They don't know how lucky they are, really.
Youngsters get very well bored of always being got at. The young people play a very important part. Their imagination, their idealism, their energy.
I used to go another place in Woolwich, but there are often fights there.
I met my boyfriend here. We come down here quite often now. It's the only place in Woolwich that you can go dancing and things like that.
This is a rhythmic dance class. It is part of the everyday curriculum at Crownwood's Comprehensive School.
What is new, then, about this particular comprehensive school in Woolwich? It replaces a number of separate institutions devised for people under the theory that boys and girls are capable of being segregated when they're quite young, and that a different kind of treatment is necessary for them as they're growing up. It's very large, of course. It has very many different departments of study, and we feel that this is a very great advantage. Children can find their own niche. They can find out how they are able to employ their talents, to express their talents. They can find out where they fail and where they succeed. They can develop their best skills to quite a high degree of expertise. They don't need to feel that they are at all inferior to people who are different from themselves. When this school was first opened, parents who saw it for the first time naturally felt some misgivings about the size of the school. They wondered whether their children would be lost in these corridors and about these workshops. What we do is to divide the large whole into a good many smaller family groups. Now, the result is that in this complex society, the individual has the chance of finding himself as an individual. We don't try to mold people any longer.
And you imagine your staying, and you found something else satisfactory. How do you manage it in the Elton production?
To meet the needs of higher education, the Polytechnic provides a complex of courses, essentially scientific in nature. The society is cosmopolitan, with students from all over the world.
Woolwich Polytechnic has a long tradition for education in the district. It was founded about 1883 by a group of voluntary workers led by Frank Dibben, a foreman at the Royal Arsenal.
Education must always be ready to change in accordance with developments in science, economics or management. In addition to the full-time courses to degrees and diplomas in technology, we are now organising short full-time courses of a postgraduate nature in science, engineering and economics.
But although the Polytechnic brings people to Woolwich from almost every country, the town is in danger of losing those born and bred within its own boundaries. To more and more of its younger inhabitants, Woolwich becomes merely a place to sleep. Jobs are more attractive and better paid at the other end of the line. And with the extra money, nights out uptown become the accepted thing. To its older inhabitants, the face of Woolwich is changing beyond recognition. The old days are past, and the present is somewhat strange. It's too late for them to think of change. Development goes on. There is scope and room for it. The way a town grows, what it does, what happens to it. These are often matters dependent on circumstance, on fate. But tomorrow and the days after, these are the days of aspiration, of hope for the future. A future that will be nothing more than a modern past, unless people care enough.